Hey everybody, we're back here at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook. He's Jason, I'm Chucky for the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends. And Jay, football is a distant memory now, or at least until the combine and the draft, which isn't that far away. But I think it's time to start putting our dancing shoes on and start thinking about college basketball and the college basketball tournament. It's always a fun time. I think once football season ends, we all start thinking about college basketball. And this year, I think the field is wide open. There's a lot of parity. Teams have moved up and down the top 25, but I'm excited about the tournament.
Yeah, and I think as the calendar turns, you're always excited to see things get into March and start talking about it. The tournament happens a little bit later in March than we normally get, as we'll be sitting on that Thursday opening tournament is March 21st.
Right.
So it's going to leak a little bit into April and combat kind of baseball season there. But these next couple weeks, these next 2.5 weeks of college basketball are absolutely fantastic. And you talked about it, as we talk about the bracketology and the 68 teams that are going to get in the tournaments, and obviously the conference tournaments and everything that's going to be going on. But these next 2 weeks are absolutely key. You talked about the teams that are at the top, whether we're talking about Houston, Purdue, UConn. We've seen all those
Tennessee
teams
playing well,
be able to be knocked off. And just recently here, UConn goes down to Creighton in almost a 20-point loss. So the world's kind of wide open there, and a lot of things can happen. But I think that these 2 weeks are really, really critical for a lot of teams that still are trying to get themselves into the big dance. There's a lot of teams sitting on the bubble. I think that we're probably sitting in this 12 to 16 teams talking about can they get in, can they find their way in, and obviously the conference tournaments have a chance to get that automatic bid by winning your conference tournament, so those will play a big part in the number of bubble teams that are potentially available make the field of 68.
I think that's the interesting part, is that there's so much parity this year, and it's so wide open that depending on what happens in the conference tournament, it's going to make the committee's decisions maybe a little bit more difficult. That some of those bubble teams that you thought probably would get in might not, depending on what happens in the conference tournament. And when you start looking at conferences, look at the Mountain West this year, how competitive that is and how many good teams there are right now. And look at UNLV. They've been playing really well of late as well, getting to host the tournament out here, but a lot of parity and a lot of good teams in the Mountain as well.
Well, I think what was specifically talked about the Mountain West, I think bracketology right now has it with 6 teams making it out of the Mountain West. And that's not with UNLV included. UNLV is on the outside looking in.
Although they played really well against ranked teams in their conference.
Yeah, and they have a big win over Creighton. They have 5 quad 1 wins. So we'll talk about top of the division wins. They're at the top of the country. They've got 4 games left on their schedule against particularly soft teams in Wyoming, San Jose State. But then they finished the year with San Diego State and Nevada, and those are going to be 2 very, very big games. I think that if they go 4-0, they've got a chance to be on the outside looking in as one of those last 4 in, last 4 out.
Their tournament here is going to be the key.
They're most likely going to have to win the tournament here. When we talk about the Mountain West, the other 2 teams that are kind of at the bottom, being Nevada and New Mexico, are somewhere in that last 4 in, last 4 buys. And New Mexico specifically suffered a terrible loss this weekend at home to Air Force, who sits at the bottom of the conference. So New Mexico is going to have to play really well. Their last 3 games, they played Boise, Fresno, and Utah State. So they're going to have to find a way to win 2 of those 3, especially looking at Boise and at Utah State. Very, very tough games. Nevada, same thing. Tough game against Colorado State. They play Fresno, Boise, and UNLV to finish. So again, that kind of beating each other up, going to have to play well. But really the surprise out of the Mountain West has been this Utah State team. Danny Sprinkle's been absolutely fantastic. They were projected to be somewhere 7th to 9th preseason in the Mountain West. They had 0 returning starters. So the job that this guy's done to have them, kind of tied for first right now. Obviously, when you look at the class of the league, San Diego State and their run that they made last year, and their kind of power ranking, they project to be a 4 seed in the tournament. But really, hats off to Utah State and what they've been able to do throughout this season. And hopefully we do get 6 teams, and it's been a major reversal of what the Mountain West has been for the last couple of years in struggling to get that 3rd or 4th team in. And we all kind of know the struggles up until last year when San Diego State was able to make that run. The Mountain West has performed particularly poor in the NCAA tournament, trying to find, praying for wins in the NCAA tournament. So as they go into this year's tournament, that's something to look at, is that they've struggled in recent years, and obviously last year they were able to turn things around a little bit. So maybe the Mountain West is kind of flipping the course here and can have success in the big tournament.
Yeah, you stole a little bit of my thunder. I was going to say the exact same thing, that the struggles that they've had so far in the tournament, but it hadn't been 6 teams. And I think the fact that conference play has been so much better this year, and that there is the possibility of 6 teams, and still not sure what's going to happen with UNLV, I think a much more competitive conference bodes well for teams when they get to the next level. So I think the tournament's going to be really interesting for the Mountain. Again, as Jay kind of talked about, compliments to the entire conference for playing so well this year and some big wins. Let's jump out now and let's look at Purdue. They've been a team that, when it comes to tournament time, they just don't get it done for whatever reason. They struggle against teams that you would think they should beat. Painter's a great coach, but he can't seem to get over the hump. Zach Edney has been great this year, but how far can he take them? And can this be the year that Purdue could maybe surprise and cut down the nets?
Well, he put up a monster game this past weekend against Michigan. You saw them really feed him the ball. I think he ended up with 35 points. Player of the year. But it's not on him. He was the player of the year last year.
Right.
He's been able to win games. He's been able to single-handedly try and win games. And obviously Purdue, when we get to the big tournament, last year lost to Fairleigh Dickinson as a number 1 seed, only the second number 1 seed to ever get beaten by a 16 seed in the tournament. The year before that, they made the Sweet 16, but they got knocked off by a number 15 seed in St. Peter's. So when we look at
why does that happen? I mean, you play in a tougher conference. You've got the Player of the Year. I guess it's that pressure now that Purdue faces every year.
And it's you can't go single-handedly through one player, even though he is the Player of the Year. And the good thing for Purdue this year is they do have some better guard play. I won't say it's better guard play. It's the same guard play because it's the same guys that they've had the last several years. But they're sophomores, or last 2 years.
But that's good,
they're
though.
Sophomores. But Braden Smith and Lawyer, Fredericks and Lawyer, are their 2 guards. And they shoot a little bit better from three-point land. They've been improving. And so Edey's got a chance to pass out to those guys. But that's really the key to them winning bigger games is do they get the good guard play.
Teams are going to try to shut down Edey, though.
Yeah, but when you shut down,
you're going to need other guys to
shut down
step
him,
up.
you have to collapse on him, which allows him, and he will. He doesn't force it. He will kick it out to those three-point shooters. So if you collapse down on him, and those guys can make their,
they have to make their three-pointers.
That Purdue's able, and again, they still are a very good defensive team. So when they don't have things going on the offensive end, and that's why they're sitting at the top of the Big Ten Conference, that's why they're already Big Ten regular season champions, is they play really, really good defense, and they go to him, and when they're not hitting their shots, they depend on that defense and continue to go back to them. And they get a lot of fouls, they go to the free throw a lot, and I think that you talk about the pressure building of being knocked off by a 15 seed, knocked off by a 16 seed, and that'll be the talk of the tournament again as we hit 3 weeks from now. Where is Purdue at, and is it an upset special to get knocked off by Cinderellas story going through that Purdue bracket? But again, I think it comes down to that guard play. They've got 3 guards. They're kind of a triple-headed guard led by Braden Smith. But I think Purdue kind of gets over that hump. I think they're at least an Elite 8 team this year.
Well, I think you said it, though. And when you get to tournament time, and it's about defense. It's about being able to play on both sides of the court. And you look at teams that can score. We've seen scoring up this year in college basketball. You look at some of the scores, and I know we talk about it with the Hub Trading team, that scores are just up. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of points that are scored in some of these games. But the fact that Purdue can play some shutdown defense, you've got Edey in the middle, I think that helps a lot. But speaking of that, we'll talk about a team that's really good offensively, Alabama, but doesn't play a whole lot of defense. And will that hurt? And I think so. I think you have to be able to play defense at this level. And when it comes to tournament time, it can't just be about scoring. You have to be able to play on both sides of the court. So I think Alabama can score with anybody in the country. They can run it up and down the court. They're fun to watch. But you have to be able to get some stops when you need them, and I think it will hurt them in the tournament because of their lack of D.
I don't have the stats in front of me on it, but they're about to break the score since like 2000.
Crazy, right.
I think they're averaging over 91 points a game, just absolutely incredible. And that's what Nate Oates, he was the Buffalo MAC Coach of the Year 2019. They brought him in. That's what they wanted to do. They want to run. They want to run. They want to run. The problem is, you talked about it. It's not necessarily that they don't play defense. It's just that they run, but they're not big.
Right.
I think they're 6'1", 6'3", 6'3". They've got a 6'11" forward and then 6'6". So when you've got 3 guys that are kind of under that 6'3", they really struggle on the perimeter guarding the defense, guarding the three-point shot. They give a lot of clean looks, and obviously when you're running like that and not playing defense, I mean, you give up some big points.
We've seen teams
games.
do that before, and it usually doesn't bode well for them in the tournament.
They gave up 117 points to Kentucky this past week. I also had a loss on the road at Auburn where they gave up 91 points, a loss on the road at Tennessee where they gave up 99 points, or 99 against Auburn, 91 against Tennessee. But the big thing for me on Alabama, they had a 3-game stretch in December where they lost to Purdue, Creighton, and Arizona. So when we talk about the class of some of the other conferences,
right, yeah.
the best team in the West, in the Pac-12, the best team in the Big Ten, and Creighton's the number 4 team out of the Big East. But when you're not able to play defense against those other big teams in the country, it's going to be tough. And Alabama sits at 19-8. Obviously, they're going to get in the dance, and the scoring's been incredible, and they're a lot of fun to watch. But a lot of fun to watch doesn't mean that they're going to be able to win games.
Who the committee pairs them up against as far as a contrast in style and what those totals are and how those totals are bet based on who their opponent is.
Yeah, Mark Sears, that's their guard, their leading scorer. He's putting up over 20 points a game. They're a lot of fun to watch, and we'll continue to cheer for them and cheer for them to continue to score points these next couple weeks, and hopefully they can kind of break that record for national scoring leaders.
So a couple of other teams that, when you look at some surprises this year, I'm not sure how much of a surprise they are, but to me it's Creighton. I know that we both kind of liked them a lot last year. They had returning players coming in. They had a great class of recruits, and at 20-8, I think Creighton's one of those teams that can make a little bit of noise. The other team for me is Auburn, which I think is really a good team. But the surprise team now that really kind of snuck into the top 25 is South Florida with Raheem. The job that he's done there, getting them in the top 25 for the first time ever. You have to remember he was at Kennesaw State last year and got them into the big dance. So he's done a tremendous job there. To me, those are kind of outside the top 10 teams that I think are kind of dangerous. I thought Dayton, too. They had that bad loss against George Mason last week. But I still think Dayton, Creighton, and for me, Auburn are 3 teams that can make a little bit of noise outside that top 10.
Yeah, and when you start to look at who's going to be the sexy Cinderella stories as we head into the tournament, and McNeese State, St. Mary's out of the West has been on an incredible run. I think they've won 16 straight games. South Florida, you talked about, won 13 straight games. These teams are going to most likely perform very well in their tournament, get a seed, but they're still going to be pretty good underdogs. Right. And kind of got to go back and look at what was their November, December schedule when they were in the non-conference schedule, and how did they perform in those non-conference games? I talked about Alabama when they performed in those non-conference schedules against some of the other teams. Kind of look at who these teams are and how they perform their non-conference schedules, because sometimes teams just match up real well in their conference schedule. You get to play all these home games in your conference schedule to where you feel really, really comfortable.
But that's what the committee does so good sometimes, is they'll put these either rivalries or contrasting styles against each other, and it really makes you think. I mean, we've talked about that so many times when even the struggles Purdue's had is their opponent matches up really well against them and is able to take some of their strength away, and that's what makes the tournament so exciting.
Well, and especially when you talk about Big Ten, ACC, Big 12, SEC basketball, to get up night after night after night after night on a Thursday, Tuesday, Saturday. Right. These are tough teams. These are tough places to travel. There's a lot more balance. So when you look at the North Carolinas and Dukes, and they lose a game here and there, even a UConn, who we just talked about, and that you, strangely enough, you had Creighton written down as your surprise team. Creighton, I have them on my list as well, with a big knockoff of UConn, and then they come back and get beat by St. John's by 20 points, and Rick Pitino
after Pitino had gone off
in his nice white getup.
How slow St. John's is, and
but Creighton, Greg McDermott, Shireman, been absolutely fantastic. Creighton is monstrous, 6'7", 7'1". They're a big team. They can score from the outside. They can score from the inside. Play good defense.
They do play good D, and I think that's a big difference for Creighton once the tournament rolls around. They're healthy this year.
They're 20-8 for a reason. You have to, you go play Seton Halls, the UConns. These teams are tough. The Butlers, the Villanovas. You go play these teams on a nightly basis, you can lose those games.
I'm going to interrupt. I think one thing that's really important this year, and we hear it from the hub guys all the time this year, is it is really tough to win on the road in college basketball. So when you talk about 20-8, you look at their home to road splits, and I think all these teams, when you look at teams with 5, 6, 8, 10 losses, it's really those struggles on the road that we've seen with the top 25. So tournament time, will there be any sort of a home bias for some of these teams based on where they're playing throughout the country?
Yeah, I think you go look at the Big 12. I think we have 3 teams Kansas, Houston, and Iowa State, they're all undefeated at home.
Right.
They still haven't lost them home. Creighton I think is 7-5 on the road, so they have some quality wins on the road. So they're a team
their
I think
losses
you look out,
are on the road.
Yeah, they're probably going to end up being a 4 seed. You made mention to Dayton, and I had circled that I don't care who comes out of the A-10, but the Atlantic 10 for me is the conference of Cinderellas. And if you go look at who plays in the Atlantic 10 and you look at their tournament performance over the last several years, you find that these teams find a way to take upsets, whether it's Davidson or UMass. At the top of the conference this year, Loyola Chicago, who's pulled some upsets the last several years in the tournament, Richmond, Dayton, and VCU. Those are the top 4 teams out of the A-10. So right now, I have all 4 of those teams circled as to who can get in the tournament. If it's 2 of them,
we didn't talk about
them.
Creighton or Dayton in their respective conferences.
But I think that the Atlantic 10 specifically for me is a conference to look for a big upset.
Again, there's so much parity. I think the conference tournaments this year are going to be so much fun to watch and so competitive. And I really think it's going to change where the committee is looking right now. If they had to pick their 68 teams right now, I think it's going to be dramatically different come the 17th because of what happens in conference play.
Yeah, I had a laundry list just for myself of teams that are kind of, whether it's the Wake Forest, Texas, Gonzaga, Providence.
Well, Gonzaga's
A&M,
back in the top
Villanova.
25 again now. So
yeah, they're still on that bubble. They're still in that last 4. We want them to go last 4. The last 8 in.
I say they're in as of today.
Out.
Right.
There's so many teams that are kind of in that mix, and it's going to come down to these. Some teams still have 4 games on their schedule from a regular season standpoint, and then their conference tournament. So it's going to be key. Obviously, we talk about the Zags in the Big West. They're most likely going to be able to run the table and end up playing St. Mary's in a conference final.
St. Mary's is really good.
So that will bode well for them. But these last kind of 8 in, last 8 out, there still can be some big wins that these teams can put up these last 2 weeks to leapfrog themselves to that getting into the tournament standpoint.
Again, that's why I think the conference tournaments are so exciting. I think we'd be a little remiss if we didn't talk about the women's tournament as well. First, congrats to the Lady Rebels, who are ranked 24th in the country right now. Just had another phenomenal season. Hopefully they can go a little bit further. Last year they ended up getting matched up with Michigan pretty early, which was a tough test, although they had some runs in that game. But really when it comes to women's basketball right now, lots about Caitlin Clark and the success that she's had and how she's kind of transformed college hoops betting. We've had props up for a number of her games when she was able to surpass Kelsey Plum for the most in the women's. Right now she trails Pistol Pete Maravich for the most scoring ever. We're looking to have some props up depending on where her game falls for that coming up. But it really has enhanced, I think, the bettors and our side of it to be more creative with women's basketball because of the success of Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, not only Caitlin Clark, but just women's college basketball.
The games are phenomenal.
There's so much more TV. It's easy to watch. We're putting up odds on just about every women's college basketball game that's being bet. We have live wagering available on the women's college basketball game. We're putting up Caitlin Clark total points scored on each of the games, and so she's brought some national attention to women's basketball, as some of the greats before her have. The talk of whether she's going to stay at Iowa, whether she's going to leave. She's obviously got a chance to go be the first pick in the WNBA, and watching the range that she had.
Indiana Fever are praying that she comes out,
and the fact that she makes that 3-pointer to break Plum's record, and she shoots it from practically mid-court, in transition, was absolutely electric.
Great.
She's a lot of fun to play, but Iowa has had some struggles, as she's gone through this kind of scoring run. They've had some tough games. They've had a loss at Nebraska, a loss in Indiana. They're still a top team in the country. What a great feeling it would be for her. What a great story it would be for Iowa and Caitlin Clark if she was able to come and complete this and send them to a Final Four and give them a chance for a national championship. But South Carolina is going to have a lot to say with that on the women's side of things. Number 1, undefeated, playing absolutely fantastic basketball.
And we'll have a lot more stuff up for the women's tournament as well. So check all that stuff out too. It's going to be fun, the tournament. And when tournament time comes, it's usually a great time of year for us with Last Man Standing, our signature contest during football season and college football. But the college basketball Last Man Standing is always a lot of fun. Same format as the tournament itself. You win and you move on. You lose and you go home. $25 entry fee for 1 entry. $100 gets you 4 and a bonus 5th entry. It really does, though, give you an opportunity from, as my late, great close friend Brian Blessing used to say, matchsticks to lumber yards, when you can have a $25 investment and have a nice payday for a tournament like Last Man Standing.
Yeah, and those of you that are new to Last Man Standing, it's a kind of our signature contest. We offer it in college football, pro football, and of course during March Madness. The key is it's $25 to get in, buy 4, get a 5th entry free. Doesn't include the Tuesday play-in game, doesn't include the Wednesday play-in games. So the first game that you're selecting is Thursday, March 21st. You're going to select a winner against the point spread. If you win that game, you advance to Friday. Got to turn your pick in for Friday. When you win on Friday, you advance to Saturday. Win on Saturday, you advance to Sunday. Take a little breather, and then come back next Thursday. And so every round of the tournament, you've got to pick a winner against the point spread to advance. All the prize money that we collect goes back to the winner. It really does make for an exciting,
and it's
especially
based on the
opening
contest
week.
line. It's all based on the spread, not just winning, but against the contest point spread.
And you can buy 5 entries. So you buy 4, you get that 5th entry free. So for $100, you get 5, hopefully
Matchsticks to lumber yard.
survive that first weekend, give yourself a chance.
Right.
But again, a lot of fun, a lot of people playing it, and again, our signature contest, and we love Last Man Standing. And the guests, you make a name for yourself by going and winning
Right.
Last Man Standing. We see a lot of the handicappers out there and professional gamblers and all that stuff that end up winning our Last Man Standing contests.
So it's not just about hoops, though. It's about racing a little bit this week as well. So the Pennzoil 400's out here. There's a lot of props up to bet on NASCAR. Make it a lot of fun. I know I've been out at the track many times, and everyone's out there talking about what drivers they have, and with the app, you've got that available. There's props up. Nitro Cross on Friday and Saturday we'll be booking as well. So a lot of fun stuff, and we're always looking to add events like Nitro Cross to our overall betting menu.
Yeah, you talk about racing, and obviously the NASCAR this week, Nitro Cross, which is a very unique event that's going to be a lot of fun on Friday and Saturday. But the other big part that we don't talk about enough is the horse
racing. Yeah.
And as we sit here kind of end of February going into March, we're going to start leading into a lot of the Kentucky Derby prep races as you get through March and April.
There's some big prep races.
Just about every weekend there's prep races leading up with all the Derby horses that are going to be running that first Saturday in May. And if you didn't know, but when you get the brand new app, you no longer have to have a sports account and a race account. Your wallet, all the money that you have in your account is good for both race and sport. So as we go through March and April, when you click over on these big Saturdays, and obviously we lead up to Kentucky Derby, you've got the racing in the palm of your hand. So just slip over to that racing side of the app, and you can bet any of the races and bet your favorite Kentucky Derby qualifying races, and obviously lead up until the Kentucky Derby.
I think I'm ready to go to the whip, man. That's awesome, though. I mean, really, again, it's one wallet. It's so convenient for you guys, and even if you didn't think about races, you could also watch the races on the app, which is pretty cool as well. So a lot of really good stuff going on right now. Again, it's tournament time, it's dancing, baseball's right around the corner. We'll be jumping into that on the next version or the next edition of Bookend. So a lot of cool stuff going on right now. Get the app. It's tournament time. It's fun. Anything else you want to finish up with?
We didn't even talk Golden Knights. We didn't even talk what's going on in the NBA. I mean, it's a fantastic
downtime.
Fantastic time of year. Teams starting to make their playoff run, and obviously from a Vegas hockey standpoint, Knights are sitting second in the Pacific right now. Had a little bit of struggles, but we're going to see them turn the corner. Hopefully, they get healthy. And not too long ago, team that won the Stanley Cup was kind of sitting in this same precarious position coming out of January, February, weren't playing all that great of hockey, started to get hot in March and April, and obviously then went on to a Stanley Cup run. So hopefully we can kind of see the Knights kind of catch fire and start to play some good hockey again.
And you get the trade deadline coming up, which is going to help a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of movement in the NHL. We've got the NFL Draft Combine, which is later this week, and then look for shortly thereafter we'll be putting up some draft props, especially with all the kind of chatter with the Bears and Caleb Williams and how many quarterbacks are going to go in the first round. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff that we're going to be adding to that wagering menu. So for Jason, I'm Chucky for the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends. We'll see you guys at one of our racing sports books real soon.